Good afternoon and welcome here to the Burnside Bowling Club in Christchurch, as we will bring you now the final of the Summerset men's singles, that final between Kelvin Scott of Canterbury up against Tony Grantham of Auckland. Earlier we saw Tony Grantham defeat Andy Curtin, and in the other semi-final we saw a real clincher, that with the defending champion Michael Galloway of Royal Oak in Auckland up against Kelvin Scott, and it was really anyone's match, and it was Kelvin Scott who ran out the winner by 21 shots to 20. So with me I've got Brett O'Reilly, of course a player himself and now a director of World Bowls, and Brett's going to sit with me throughout this final, and we'll bring you all the live action bowl by bowl. So this should be a good final, Brett, shouldn't it?
Yeah, Kevin, two very good singles players, both former national champions and both in really good form. Certainly
are, and the greens that have been presented to them assist, or not assist, but they certainly give it for a really top level game, because the greens, watching these greens today, they're really top speed and are ideal for a good game. I just hope that marker learns that we get the marker to give us some guidance and move aside from the head. There we go, good man. So
yes, I think Jamie Ferris, the greenkeeper, new greenkeeper here at Burnside's got this number 3 green playing very well. I actually played here in section play of the singles, or maybe practiced would be a better word, and they were running magnificently, and that's shown in the quality of the play this morning. Despite a little bit of breeze, which is making it tricky from time to time, the surface itself is magnificent.
Well, and earlier we've just seen the final of the women's pairs, and it was one-way traffic, to be fair. The combination of Bev Morrell and Sandra Keith over Taylor Bruce and Claire Hendra. I think it's fair to say that Taylor Bruce and Claire Hendra would have gone into the match as the favourites, but not to be. Bev Morrell, the 80-year-old lead for Sandra Keith, was simply outstanding, and really gave a lesson on draw play and they ran out the winners by 19 shots to 8, and deserved winners, because they led the game all the way and they were dominant in their performance, Brett.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a real masterclass from Bev Morrell of leading. Just gone onto a line, comprehensively outplayed Taylor Bruce, and really laid the platform for Sandra Keith, who's no stranger to winning national titles and no stranger to winning finals, and she did everything she needed to, and they were very commanding in their win.
So first end gone.
1 to Kelvin Scott from that first end, as Kelvin delivers the jack just to start the second end.
So in this race to 21, Kelvin Scott delivering the jack. It's interesting watching this compared to the pairs, Brett. We've seen the mat and the jack length varied. We saw consistently in both semi-finals, of course, and the final, where both players, both combinations, were using the 2 metre mark really as their jack. Didn't see much movement, but Kelvin Scott, as we know, 59-year-old singles winner in 1998, and is certainly a player who it doesn't matter what the surface, doesn't matter anything. He's one of those really top draw players, as is Tony Grantham. And we saw the ability of Kelvin Scott, of course, in the latter stages of that semi-final against Michael Galloway.
Yeah, I mean, he really is the Iceman under pressure, Kelvin, and twice in the semi-final against Mike Galloway, he had to save the game with his last bowl, and played 2 magnificent bowls. And yeah, he'll be very hard on this track, but equally Tony Grantham, former world champion of champion singles winner, and in his semi-final against Andy Curtin, when there was a little bit of a condition change, the wind got up, he picked it, and was very steady. Well, so this should be a great game, Kevin.
Andy, the challenge for Andy is that Tony Grantham knew as well that Andy's going to play it all his balls on the backhand. But Andy Curtin's had a great tournament. He's a comeback, so to speak. Hasn't played for a long time, and was equal to the occasion. Beat Seamus Curtin, one of the up and coming New Zealand players, and it's something that we've had quite a bit of discussion about today, and you and I will discuss as well, no doubt, Brett, that it's really some of these younger players haven't really yet driven home the call for pick me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, probably no one's ever played less bowls on the forehand and made a New Zealand semi-final of the singles. Andy was in my section of the singles as well, and he hasn't been playing a lot. But, you know, I think, again, he just showed the benefit of just playing consistently, not being too flashy, not trying to play too many shots, just recognising that, you know, singles is a drawing game largely. And as you say, just ploughed his way through the field. And you know, up until the second half of that semi-final, you know, looked for all money like it might be the fairy tale story, and he might be back in a New Zealand singles final in Christchurch. You know, probably, you know, over 30 years since he was last in the final, but it wasn't to be.
Not to be, but you know, again, like Galloway's proven, he's another comeback player really. Last year winning the singles, this year through to the semi-final of the singles, going down by one shot, and of course still going. It appears still to come, and you know, still a player that you know is worthy of the silver firm without any shadow of doubt. And like we saw in the women's pairs, Viv Morel gave a classic example: is I'll find the line, I'll find the track, and I'll just draw shots.
Look, we say it's a game for all ages, and it certainly isn't. And you know, and it is about experience and composure. And I think we're seeing here already. You know, Kelvin Scott's semi-final against Mike Galloway were a lot of close heads, a lot of tight bowls, and already he's just hit his rhythm. It looks like Tony Grantham might
needs the jack clean. Got the jack through the gap for one, and as Val Smith and I were talking as well earlier on, Brett, on this particular surface or these surfaces, if you don't take your green, if you're playing under the line, you're gonna pay the price.
Absolutely. I mean, those people familiar with the game, and there'll be many bowlers who'll be watching, will know these are many Toto greens. You know, so they tend to hook a little bit at the end. And so, as you say, if you're slightly narrow, you get punished big time. Well,
you can't. You just simply don't want to. You can't steer your bowl on this surface, which, you know, players can be guilty of. And I think that's where it highlights to me the true, really experienced players, the ones who can adapt to all surfaces, whether it be starweed, whether it be grass, whether it be Manitoto. It's about adapting and getting consistency under those conditions. And I'm hopeful now, as we see Tony Grantham opening with a very, very good bowl, 1-all, just sitting lower the jack. And I'm hoping, Brett, now with the appointment of Leif Selby at his role in Auckland Bowls, that he's going to become, I hope, a driving force for the lift and performance, so to speak, of some of our players, to get them to that next level where we've got a number of good players at the international level, Shannon McElroy, Ali Forsyth, etc., Val Smith, Caitlin Inch, but it's that next bracket where we've got work to do to get them to what I would call that winning performance level. And we've seen the experience of, like, here's Tony Grantham coming back, Kelvin Scott, with Andrew Curtin. These guys, you know, these are the guys of the past, so to speak. But, you know, their experience on all surfaces and all speeds, and the ability to draw and game management is something that we really, the sport in New Zealand at present, needs some work on.
Yeah, look, I agree with you, Kevin. I mean, you know, it's a game where mental toughness, you know, really is important, particularly when you're under pressure. And even though these greens are playing well, you've got to really work hard at it, because unlike playing on some of the slower greens with the narrower bowls that players use today, you can get away with being a little bit narrow on those greens. But on these greens, as we said earlier, you're narrower and you get punished.
Well, we just saw then Tony Grantham draw around that Kelvin Scott bowl, and that you know, that's the thing that we actually were talking about, not playing down under the line, Brett, but doing everything to get back to the centre line, where your best scoring chances are going to be. As we see this bowler, Kelvin Scott, is going to come under the line.
Tony's.
Tony Grantham, sorry, is under the line. Kelvin Scott drew around that Grantham bowl.
And I think that, you know, I watched most of Kelvin's semi-final, and probably a feature of it was the greening of his bowl. You know, he was never probably more than a metre or so off the centre line. You know, occasionally, of course, but he was very, very steady and consistent, and that's what you need at this level. You need, you know, it's minimising those number of bad bowls so that you really can put the pressure on.
Kelvin Scott always has had that ability within his game. You know, he's always been an outstanding draw player.
I was talking to him earlier, Kevin, and he said he thinks he's been to the quarterfinals of the national singles at least 10 times.
Oh, it's a lot. It's a lot.
He's won one. He's been in semi-finals before, so yeah, he's no stranger to this, and that's a testament to the strength of his game and his consistency. Tony again missing the line here, and you'll see it, that buckle away a lot. He's just going to get a sit, but yeah, that. You really get punished when you narrow here.
When you steer yourself under the line, I suppose you could really say, Brett, is when you, for the purist out there, when you're trying to use, you know, the jack is the dead line in, you're going to pay for it. You know, the line is to where the shot bowl actually is, and that way it's going to make sure that you're going to have green that's going to get around the bowl. You're trying to get to the jack line, you're going to finish under. If you watch this bowler, Kelvin Scott's just doing exactly what we were just talking about, not going to quite make it, but was certainly going to finish in that counting area.
Exactly right, Kevin, and I think a noticeable feature of Kelvin's play in the semi-final was when he was under pressure, he drew. Didn't try and have play with with reaching weight. He just drew, and and on both the third to last end and the second to last end, he saved the game by drawing within a few centimetres of the jack, and that's what you've got to do on this.
Well, and it also highlights two other factors as well, Brett. Is it highlights one's confidence, and running with that is one's ability to be able to do so, because he's made his mind up what shot he's going to play, and he knows where he's got to go. And the good thing about Kelvin is he's not a player that tries to find a shortcut to the jack, which is I know with the modern day bowls and that, you can take shortcuts to the jack, but on a green, as you rightly say, like we've got here, although no breeze today in Christchurch, which is a big plus, you certainly pay the penalty if you try and sort of duck and dive your way to the jack. You've got to get to that. You're not going to score without as Mike Kernan said to me when they won the World Fours out here on this very green, actually, as Mike said to me before they played Australia, that all we've got to do is make sure we get bowls around the head, around the centre line, and let the Australians try to fight their way out of it.
Absolutely.
And as it turned out, it was a convincing win for New Zealand in that match.
Well, that's right. You can spend a lot of time on these greens just missing, and while you're just missing, the other team
are
adding and scoring, and that's what New Zealand did here last time. Interesting also to mention for the final, the forthcoming selection of our Commonwealth Games team. Tony Grantham's in that squad, and he's obviously pretty determined to try and regain a place in that New Zealand team. He's been in the Commonwealth Games before in 2012. He's been at 2014, should I say. He's been at a World Bowls and won a bronze medal there in Adelaide. Kevin, he's got to be knocking on the door.
Certainly, but we also got to remember in that there's a couple of players who, because of the COVID scenario, based in Australia, who haven't been able to have the opportunity to be able to, who were going to be coming to this event and playing it. But Ali Forsyth and Crystal Lee were both going to be coming here to play. But of course the COVID thing has put paid to that. But they like Crystal Lee as an example has had a great season in Australia. Won the Queensland Pairs and runner-up in the Australian champion pairs, and of course they start. In fact, this weekend they start the Queensland Premier League gets underway, which is a pretty good event to be playing in. But I know he'd rather be here at present, and I'm sure Ali would have been as well, and Caitlin Inch as well in that predicament. But I think it's more, and this isn't having a crack at the younger players, but I think really it's what I would say the more seasoned, experienced players over the last 2 years who have really put their hands up. And I refer to, like I said, Lance Pascoe in winning the pairs last year. You know, he was outstanding. Michael Galloway, who's came back, won the singles and beaten semi-finalist, won the New Zealand champion and champion triples at Hastings. And, you know, they're still there.
They are. They absolutely are. And, you know, Kelvin Scott holding probably 3 shots here. Tony just getting the marker. Yeah, I think the marker said 3. Tony just struggling for weight at the moment on his...
Well, he's changed his hand here to try and it's been interesting watching that. There's 2 paces on the side of the green as well. And that's not having a crack at the green at all.
Tony's actually playing with a bit of weight here. Looking
he
for
needs
the
the jack clean.
Oh no, misses that, and that's a good clink for Kelvin Scott.
Certainly is. And that race to 21. So the marker had indicated that it was 3 shots to Kelvin Scott, and he's got the. You can see he's got the 3. Yeah, the 3 blue cherries ready. So it takes Kelvin Scott to a 5-1 lead. But as we know, Brett, in this format of the game, you don't run out of ends, you run out of numbers, don't you?
Absolutely. First to 21 shots, and we know Tony's a great competitor. A little bit surprised with the shot selection.
I certainly was. I thought he was going to change his hand. I thought he was going to try and draw to get... Like, second shot would have been even a good number. And it's interesting, like, one of the things that Val Smith and I were just talking about in that Peers final, perhaps in some cases, some players lose the art of understanding that second shots is sometimes as good as having the shot, you know, in the context of the match.
Yeah, and I thought that was a real feature of Kelvin's play in the semi-final. I mean, you know, up against the defending champion, you know, Mike Galloway, a high-quality opponent, he really just tried to keep the game as tight as he could, and then you hope that at the right time the luck or the skill goes your way, which it did. So
well, what it actually proves as well, Brett, is the confidence in the draw that Kelvin Scott's got, that he knows he will back himself to get out of trouble with the draw. So Tony Grantham, it's a good response, sits just slightly lower the jack, but right on the centre line. And Kelvin Scott is about 2 foot in front, having a good look. Is the Cantabrian.
And worth pointing out, Tony Grantham, about 12 months since he had major reconstruction on his shoulder.
That's right, he did too.
And which was a big decision for him to make, but he wanted to do that to give himself a chance of being in the Commonwealth Games frame. And so nice to see him now back. Didn't play in the Nationals
Kelvin
last year.
Scott just nipped, got a touch, did he, on the jack, just nipped by.
So great to see that, you know, having not played in the Nationals last year, Tony's back to full form, and we know he's a determined individual. You know, he and Kelvin Scott, not dissimilar players really in terms of their commitment and their attitude to the game.
And Kelvin Scott played, changed his hand the second, and sometimes Kelvin's a bit difficult to read on the mat. It was delivery, this is close into the body, and you're not always 100% sure. And he's on the backhand again, wasn't far away with his second, gets past those front bowls, gets down to the jack. Has he got the weight to get the way down? No, he hasn't, and he's going to fall lower the jack, but that shot is his best shot option.
Very good line again. Yes, yeah, you can stand behind Kelvin on the mat sometimes playing him and not be certain at all which hand he's playing.
Absolutely. And Tony Grantham now endeavouring on his forehand to get down to draw just inside that bowl of Kelvin Scottson behind the jack, which is second shot. It's not just going to drift by. It's on a good line to where he wanted to go to, that's for sure, but finishes in a good spot right on the centre line. And of course, still another bowl left for Tony Grantham. Kelvin Scott obviously pondering whether he feels comfortable about drawing around, whether he'll get enough pull around the front bowl of Tony Grantham's perhaps to that shot bowl.
Yeah, it's true in this situation that Grantham's probably got second, third and fourth shot, but but he's also got the back bowl. So yeah, Kelvin looks like he's changing his hands. So maybe he is going to just play with a little bit of weight and see if he can get a result on that shot bowl. Let's see.
He's not a big pace attacker, is Kelvin, and he is playing with that weight to try and get that shunt through to the bowl.
Close.
He's close to getting a chip onto the bowl, and he will do so.
Oh, brilliant shot.
Brilliant shot from Kelvin Scott. He looked at what he wanted to do, didn't he? And he summed that up. But it was controlled weight, Brett. It wasn't blasting at the head. It was controlled weight through the head to the bowls.
Yep, he's ended up with 2 shots that just signalled by the marker, and that is playing the percentages again.
Absolutely it is.
Just not, knowing that if you miss, that the worst you're going to be off is 1 down.
It's Tony Grantham on the mat. And we'll line up in the pairs tomorrow with Gary Lawson. So on the forehand, how's that line going to come back towards the centre line? Breaking now towards the centre line. There's a great response from Tony Grantham. Superb bowl from Tony Grantham, and finishes jack level and shot. That was a fantastic recovery there from Tony Grantham. Definitely 1 down after that great sort of weighted shot from Kelvin Scott. And Grantham onto the draw. Didn't have a hell of a lot of room really, but drew to jack level. It's interesting as well, but most of the day, all day, we've really seen the jack up around the 2 metre mark, and it seems to be a comfort, a good length. Because I think trying to play real short ends on this green, I'd call it the suicide length, to be fair.
It's very delicate, and I think the wind, on the shorter ends, the wind, it's not very breezy at all. But the bowls just seem to hold out a little bit sometimes on the shorter ends. Where on the longer ends, I think you can be a little bit more confident on the arc.
Well, you've got more chance to come home, haven't
you? Absolutely, and I think that's why the more experienced players are favoured playing that length.
Well, the great thing about watching these players is, and here's a lesson for all the, I'd say, younger bowlers, they believe in the bowl working its way to the jack, not trying to force its way to the jack through centre, through playing down under the line. They will always be arcing towards the jack, not away from the jack with sort of searching weight.
Great start from Kelvin Scott, and Kelvin works in the building industry and started his career as a plasterer.
He did,
and he applies that same plastering effect to his draw bowls. He's pretty steady. Sorry, that's a terrible pun, but very true about the way Kelvin plays.
Oh, he was telling me, I didn't realise it until this morning. He was telling me it's actually it's 6 years since he's last played the Nationals.
Wow. Because he's been playing in the fours, but not in the singles.
He's played in the fours. Yeah, so he was telling me this morning. It's 6 years since he played, but he's always been around. He's always, if you're looking at last day players, Kelvin Scott would have one of the best records of a last day player.
Absolutely, former runner-up in the pairs with Philip Skoglund at Henderson. He's been a key man in many good fours teams and been runner-up in 3 nationals, including.
And this is exactly what we've just been talking about, Brett. Just let the bowl work its way back. The green's in perfect condition. You take the green, you get rewarded.
Yeah, it's an old saying. You take the green, you draw the shot.
Yeah, it's. And even though we've got narrower bowls, some things haven't changed, have they?
Absolutely right.
So Grantham on the attack, trying to get to the shot bowl, get it. Desperately unlucky there. The jack would have gone back, certainly, but he nearly got the cannon to both bowls. The inside of the shot bowl certainly would have dislodged the other bowl as well, and you'd have thought he'd have made contact with one of those.
And this is where Tony will have to be careful not to play too many short bowls, because if Kelvin gets on his game and Tony hasn't got position bowls, it's going to be a pretty difficult afternoon.
Yeah, and
again, really good line and good weight here. That looks like it potentially another shot.
It doesn't really. It sort of fattens the target up a bit, but not. And these are one of these situations where you just, at this point in time, he has to get it. Absolutely. Otherwise, he's facing 4 down. So on the drive, he's got one of them. Got 2. That's a good result.
Very good drive.
Very good result. Leave that shot bowl sitting there. Take the other two bowls right out of the contention. Sure, there's room here for Kelvin Scott to draw another, but missing the target area there. Brett was certainly looking at four down the barrel, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a good percentage drive from Tony to make sure that he was at least going to make contact with one of the bowls and not get that gap again.
Another lesson there as well. He drove at the outside of the target, not trying to drive at the target. Now, if he'd got hold of the shot bowl as well, that was a bonus, but it was about reduction and percentage, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And with the way it was sitting, if he'd got the shot bowl on the jack, he wouldn't necessarily have improved the situation because he had no back bowls.
And the jack would have gone, the way it's situated, would have gone straight back in a straight line back towards the ditch. Kelvin Scott just continuing on that same line.
Oh,
just look at this. He gets past the front. He's going to do so. Look at that. Superb bowling from the Cantabrian. And that'll be 2 shots to Kelvin Scott. Takes him to a 7-2 lead in this race to 21. And what we're seeing very early on in this match, Brett, is that consistency that we're talking about. He's unflappable on the draw.
Yeah, I wondered that the semi-final between Andrew Curtin and Tony Grantham, the heads weren't that close. You know, particularly towards the end of the game, Tony was scoring and not necessarily with the bowls particularly close, where the Galloway Scott semi-final was much tighter, and I think Kelvin will have come out of that feeling pretty confident, and suddenly Tony's finding he's against an opponent who's unwavering.
Well, and the other thing that he's playing against is a player who actually plays better when the heads are tighter.
Absolutely.
If there's a lot of room to draw, I'm not saying that Kelvin wouldn't draw the shot, but his consistency may not be at the same level as you get bowls around the head, and Kelvin Scott will just keep drawing.
Yep, he is metronomic when he's on his game. And here we go again with the first bowl, beautiful line into the head, slightly short, but again, just playing with that really, really good, consistent line.
But easy to adjust off that because he's got the line, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So he knows he just needs that metre of weight. He's got the line. Grantham, and from Tony's point of view, he doesn't want to be going, geez, which hand, backhand, forehand, where do I go, searching for hands, when it's always difficult when your opponent can settle on a line and a way. It means now all day we've found Brett playing down here, right, you won't get the drawback, you get wide out there, and sure, it had a bit of weight on it, but it's certainly nowhere near as kind a draw hand as what Kelvin just played down on the forehand side.
Yeah, so that'll have Tony scratching his head a little bit because I'm sure he thought it was going to pull a lot more.
Normally you'd think it would, wouldn't you? That's the normal. You get out on that backhand arc, you normally expect it to, to work its way back. This is Kelvin Scott really at his best. Look at this round the front bowl clean, sitting right in behind the jack, and that's and not that Tony Grantham, by any stretch of imagination, he's more than capable of footing it here, but it's about that first and second bowl pressure, isn't it, Brett? That just makes it that much difficult. Good line here, though, from Grantham. This is coming down towards, this is close to getting the result. Sits outside the shot bowl onto the centre line, but he was certainly right in the target area.
Yeah, very unlucky there, Tony, and a great adjustment after his first bowl.
You're right, because he had to change that line quite considerably and had the weight right, got them both. But you can see again how Kelvin Scott's got this line coming down this way, Brett. Look at this again.
This is really metronomic. He's just slightly short this time, but again,
but he owns that hand, doesn't he?
He does own that hand.
And that's what makes it, that then makes it challenging for your opponent, doesn't it, when they own one hand. Yeah, Tony Grantham not far away with his second. I just questioned the line. He's brought it in a bit to try and search his way down to the jack. Sits inside the bowl. Will make sure he's got second shot.
Beautiful weight.
Perfect weight. I think there's still nothing better. I know we've got all these artificial surfaces and indoor and everything else, and we understand that they're part of the game. But there's still nothing better, in my viewpoint, being the purest one could say, out on a beautiful Cotula green, perfect conditions, and a green to match that gives equal opportunity to both players. It's a real game of art.
Oh,
isn't it?
absolutely. You know, this green. I mean, these greens in Burnside, I guess, are world renowned. I mean, they've hosted 2 world championships. They've hosted many great New Zealand events, and you know, and you really see bowls at its best on this. You know, particularly outdoors.
Well, I've been lucky. I've been part of sort of the commentating group for both 2008 and 2016 World Championships here at Burnside, and where I think I saw some of the best days of some New Zealand performances.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Kelvin's close again here. Looks like he might just be heading over the back just to
He'll
cover.
be quite happy to be down through there. You know, might have gone a bit further than what he thought, Brett, because Tony Grant.
One down.
The movement of the jack is certainly in Tony's favour, and I'm picking that shot on his backhand. He'll be playing for either sit the shot bowl or just he won't be rushing at it, just trying to get a touch on the jacks. All it's certainly in his favour. He's on that wider line. And how's the weight to come back to the centre line? Just going to go by, but again, not far away.
Yep, good. It's definitely the trickier side on this rink. As you said, we saw that in the women's pairs. This
right
morning.
Through this morning, I noticed it and it was interesting. It took till 10 ends for someone to decide to change. You could see there was bowls that just weren't getting that nice draw. Good to see a good crowd in here, isn't it? You know, the Nationals.
Absolutely. I mean, I think Christchurch is always such a popular location for the Nationals because the greens are so good. The weather's been outstanding. I'll probably curse it. We'll have rain. We'll have rain for the men's pairs and the women's singles that start tomorrow. But it's been good. And you know, in talking to locals, I don't think the greens have ever been in better quality. I mean, they're always very good, but I've heard no complaints from anybody about greens so far.
Well, the other thing, Brett, to be fair as well in that regard, for the greenkeepers, with the whole COVID scenario and lockdowns, it's been a challenging winter or preparation phase for a number of greenkeepers to be able to do the maintenance work on the greens to get them ready. Look at this from Kelvin Scott. He's centre line. Bang on.
Yeah, the plasterer's got the trowel out this
He's
afternoon.
got the trowel out, all right. He's in great form, as Kelvin Scott. So full marks to our greenkeepers and the New Zealand Greenkeepers Association to make sure that we have got greens of this standard to host these these major events. Tony Grantham, not to be outdone, just slips by. And surely, Brett, you know, you've now been involved in the World Bowl, so congratulations on your appointment to the board. You would think that World Bowls, recognise that, let's say, New Zealand and Australia do present an ideal environment with greens, facilities, all sorts of things for international events.
Yeah, I think, you know, the last couple of decades, you know, we've seen more and more international events held in Australia and New Zealand. We've seen more and more players from the Northern Hemisphere base themselves down here. And that's because the greens are so good. The playing season in the summer is longer than in the Northern Hemisphere typically. And they can you know, they're playing on such great surfaces. And that's going to be one of the challenges, of course, for the Southern Hemisphere players going to Birmingham for the Commonwealth Games, because the greens there will be a lot slower than these, which for those people that are not familiar with those kind of greens means you take a lot less, your line's a lot narrower, and you have to put a lot more effort into the bowl because it's pretty slow.
But at 13 seconds, but I was at Lebanon and Spa 2 years ago, and the English women's fours were on, and I spent some time with Sian Honor, part of the English side, and I really don't think now that it's too challenging. When we used to go to England and play on 8, 9, 7.
Yes, we all remember the Manchester Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, that's the games I was doing, where you need the motorbike to get the bowls up the green. Grantham looking for the jack here. The split opened for him.
Close.
He's close to getting.
Very close.
He can get both the shot bowls or the jack.
Great
Got
result.
them both. Well played by Tony Grantham. That split was on. Kelvin just moved it slightly, the bowl, which opened it up for that shot of for Tony Grantham to play. Missed with his second bowl, but got it dead right with his next.
I think you're right, Kevin. I think our players play a lot more in Australia than they did in times gone by, so they are used to playing on slower greens there. And I think the other thing, as you mentioned earlier, whether it's a slow green or a fast green, good technique will adapt.
Look, if you take golfers, the professional golfers, it doesn't matter whether they're playing at St Andrews or if they're playing in the US. It's still pretty much the same, isn't it? You know, you still got to. It's about your delivery. It's about, and those are the key things. Kelvin Scott here on the recovery. Again. He's close again. Just going to sit outside the Tony Grantham bowl. Opportunity here for a 2 for Tony Grantham after he was successful with that run shot. You're right. And the other thing, of course, which has changed, Brett, is the type of bowls which we're using as well, and the forcing shot game that they play in the home nations is now quite favourable in the New Zealand and Australia sort of box of tricks, because we would draw and drive before. That's just the way it was. But now with the narrower bowls, or not narrow, but the different running bowl surfaces, it means that there is a far greater shot variety which we are capable of playing. Yeah,
I think, you know, for those I guess historians or people interested in the history of the game, I mean, it was probably when the late Morgan Moffat settled in Christchurch after the 1974 Commonwealth Games, you know, had played for Scotland, and he really changed the philosophy of New Zealand players like Peter Bellis and Phil Scotland, who were great drivers, but helped them adapt their game to realise that actually a drive doesn't move a ball very far on a really slow green.
I remember the year they won the Falls. We got beaten in the semi-finals playing
Good starter, Tony.
With the late Jim Christie, and Morgan Moffat put on an exhibition that was, he was the run and push shot, and he was he took another shot, added another shot into the New Zealand game that we really didn't have, did we?
Absolutely, and the late Phil Scotland, who, you know, I played a lot of bowls with.
Scott again.
Well done, Kelvin. You know, he's just nagging away at that line, and then it just comes down to the speed.
Yep.
But the late Phil Scotland, who I had the privilege of playing a lot of bowls with when I was younger, said that Morgan really, turned his international game around, and I think it was no secret that Phil was a lot more successful internationally, having both playing with Morgan and then later with others.
Good
because
response.
he adapted his game. Yeah, great response from Tony. He's giving himself a chance by being over and making sure that he's got a chance to play.
Well, the other thing that Morgan Moffat did, and he was I'd say just about the first to do it, he was very demanding on his team, but in a competitive way. He not slagging you or that, but he was ultra competitive. He was Mr. Competitive. And remembering, of course, he played out here in 1974.
Absolutely.
In the Commonwealth Games here in Christchurch. So.
Shot ball, 1 ball low.
Just had a text message from our old friend Peter Shaw. From just south of Brisbane in Queensland, a former national singles pairs and fours winner. And great to hear from you, Peter. And trust that you're still going well on the greens in Queensland.
So the Tony Grantham bowl, just dropping low, the jack.
He'll be disappointed with that one, Kevin.
Certainly would. Was Peter's a member of the club that has built the lovely complex? Was it Seamus Curtin played there for 1 year? They built a brand new complex in the not a brand new complex. It was clubs came together and built. And Peter's a member. I can't remember the name of the club.
I know he was playing out at Wellington Point in Queensland at one point, and still very competitive. As he was.
Peter Shaw, competitive.
Well, it's a Shaw family characteristic, I believe, Kevin.
I was going to say that's yeah.
For those viewers who are not familiar, Peter part of the Shaw rugby dynasty, and pretty tidy rugby player in his own day, but not quite as good as his cousin Mark.
No, not but competitive for sure. It was and did a fantastic job in New Zealand. Of course, then went with Peter Keane as part of the selectorial management side of New Zealand, and brought a number of the younger players through to New Zealand honours. There's a better response here from Tony Grantham. Has got the weight to get all the way to the jack. There's a fantastic attempt. Turned the bowl over. And what did it turn it enough?
I think he's still one down, but that was a much better bowl again.
The marker just put the red lollipop up. There it is.
Wow. Well, that's a great bowl. That's a great bowl from Tony, and a really good recovery after that third bowl where he was short. Again, just emphasising the importance of just good line.
Absolutely.
Just playing up to it. Chance of getting the bowl or the jack.
Whether the marker made an error there or not, or I was colour blinded to what. I'm sure I saw him put the marker, put the red lollipop up. Peter, so we'll see. Kelvin Scott will just endeavour to play down to what is that likely counting bowl of.
He's played this
turns the ball cleanly through the. That is class.
That is a brilliant bowl. Again, great line, Kevin.
So just let the bowl work towards the centre line. Had, let's say, 18 inches of extra weight. Put the Tony Grantham bowl was in a good spot, and he just pushed it straight through the head. And that's about control, confidence, and knowing where the centre line is.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think so far in the game, he's probably only missed his line with maybe 10 or 20% of his bowls, and then just missing it. So he's just, that sort of consistency just gives you such a great platform to build on here.
But it's interesting though, Brett. I know we've got a New Zealand squad and everything. I understand all that, but Kelvin Scott, on what we've seen today and what we know of the player, is still more than capable of being the silver fern.
Yeah, look, it's probably a bit of a mystery why someone who is as consistent as Kelvin, because not only has he done well in nationals, but if you look at he's been an integral member of.
Have a look at that Canterbury into centre record.
Canterbury, a dominant player in the inter centre. He's won national club championships triples. He's won a national interclub title. So, but he's very unobtrusive.
Totally.
He just gets on with the job. Not typically been a skip, just typically been a lead or two in most teams, and just the plasterer just goes about his work. 9 into centre titles. Yeah, that's incredible. And you'd probably say over. I think it was back in the 1990s he won his singles title in Wellington.
Yes, it was
when he beat Morris Symes in
1998.
And he's probably been one of the most consistent players in New Zealand bowls since then. And yet to wear the silver fern. So great bowl. He's relentless.
He's relentless. And I agree, Britton. Sometimes, as a selector in sport, sometimes you have to put at certain times you have to put the young aspiring up and comers, sort of put them in the cupboard for a wee while and. Look at where your really experience is that's going to strengthen your overall side. Yeah, I watched Kelvin play his first game of post-section play against Damon Pearson from Birkenhead, a club that Tony Grantham's also played at, and I believe still a member. And in that game, Damon, who's a very promising North Harbour player, and I'm one of the selectors, so I'll be pleased I said that. Gave Kelvin a really good game. Kelvin was in front and Damon came right back at him. But his composure never looked flustered, even when in a couple of situations where Damon really looked like he might get in front of the game, and then Kelvin just sticks to the basics,
and he won out in that game, and of course has really had some very good ones. Beat the great Gary Lawson on the way through yesterday, who's been a good mate and teammate of Kelvin's over many years. And Gary was in pretty good form. I watched his play also out at the Papanui Club, but Kelvin was commanding. Beat Steve Beale, another former national title holder. So he said no easy run through here.
The other thing about Kelvin is he just gets on with the job, and what he's doing here now with that lead of 10-3, he's really starting to put that scoreboard pressure on Tony Grantham.
And here he is again.
And cutting down these shot selections for Tony Grantham. Now, here he's line 3. So what do you do here? I would be saying
Tony may look at attacking this on the forehand,
changing his hand and playing right through the bowls.
Because at 10-3, he's going to have to be very careful that the game just doesn't get out of his reach here.
And playing with that weight, as we spoke, he's outside the target.
That time he didn't go for the percentage. He didn't go for the outside.
That was out there.
Yep.
Was that?
And 3 to Kelvin. That makes it 13-3 to Kelvin Scott. And one thing we know about bowls is the game can change quite quickly. But for Tony, he needs to really find some consistency. Otherwise this final will slip away quite quickly with the way Kelvin's playing.
Well, it's about consistency, as we've spoken about, isn't it? And Kelvin is, he's. I'd say it's fair to say, 3 of his 4 bowls on each end are effective bowls, and that relentless consistency certainly puts pressure on your opposition.
And as I said earlier, I think Kelvin having come out of that magnificent semi-final against Mike Galloway, where twice he had to save the game by drawing close shots. He's really just lifted that form from that semi-final, applied it, and here he is again. Same line.
Well, you know, Brett, that how much first bowl pressure can create, especially in singles. It's only you, and it's tough.
One thing we know with Tony, he won't give up. He's an amazing
Certainly
competitor.
Won't.
He was a long-time lead in the New Zealand team, and I remember the Australian players saying to me, just how gritty he was. And here he is. That's a nice reply. He's obviously found his line on that on that hand, and let's hope he can build on that. Because we know that these two are both great singles players, and this deserves to be a great final.
Well, 2 ends can change a whole game, can't it? You pick up a 3 or something and change the length. It can very quickly in singles, things can change. But if we're talking about consistency and getting to the centre line and giving yourself every scoring opportunity, that's exactly what we're seeing with Kelvin Scott. And that was an example then where he just drew through the bowls and right down to the centre line and sits just neatly now in behind the jack.
Yeah, 2 very good bowls from Kelvin. And
good response here from Tony Grantham. This is a good bowl here from Grantham. Is it going to get all the way? Yes, it will. Now, one would think that will force a change of hand, Brett, with that Tony Grantham shot bowl is situated.
Yes, I think you're right, Kevin. As hard as it is to pick Kelvin,
is hard to pick.
Kelvin, I think he is going to play this one on the backhand. Yes, he is, and he'll be looking just to reach down to that. He's got a nice little catcher just in behind there.
Well, he's following it, but looks as though it's just going to duck under the line. He might get the back of the bowl. No, he doesn't, but
again, good weight.
I was just going to say, but the thing I like about that shot that he played, although it didn't make contact, it's the controlled weight that he played to the head. So the bowl still stays in a position where it could count.
Yep. He's given himself 2 catches now, and Tony's obviously just trying to get around behind because he can see what Kelvin will be playing to. That's a pretty good catcher from Tony, but the thing with Kelvin is he plays with such controlled weight. The jack probably won't go that far,
Well, that's correct, because he's not playing with that sort of couple of that really extra weight that's going to push the jack sort of back towards the 2 metre mark. He's just going to, his weight control is really just sitting on top of the bowl or slight movement of the jack. He's not a what I call a real deli attacker.
Yeah. Yeah, look, he just plays with good rhythm, doesn't he, all the time? Once you find your line, it's just about speed, and he's close here.
He's close, very, very, very close to this. Look at this.
This is outstanding stuff. This is outstanding.
As you said, he just controlled that weight line and just played with weight that's not going to move the jack around, not going to destroy the head.
Yeah, I think you can see someone who's in a really confident space and playing at the top of his game.
Tony Grantham endeavouring to save the situation, is going to be under the line, needs to get inside this bowl and turn in, won't do so. It's another 2 to Kelvin Scott. I would say it's 2. Leave it to the market.
I thought he might have played with a little bit of weight, but given that he had a bowl behind, but probably felt he still had a bit of room. 2 to Kelvin Scott.
That's 15-3. That's starting to get... But in saying that, Brett, although the score is 15-3, one's got to take their head off to what Kelvin Scott is displaying out here this afternoon, isn't he?
But, this is magnificent. I mean, often we get to a final situation and you see the play, the play maybe being a little bit looser because, you get a bit of maybe some nerves. But this is absolutely top draw singles play. This is as good as it gets. Kelvin's hardly played a loose bowl.
Correct.
In the final, and that's superb. And look at it. Here he is again.
He's done that line again down towards the jack. Will just slide by the jack, but to the centre line, just only about 2 feet behind, and it's just it's that consistency.
Yeah, this end's important for Tony. He's really got.
He's got a score.
Yeah, and he's got a.
He's got to score and change the length.
Yeah, and string some consistent bowls. He's close here. He's close.
He's very close as it breaks down towards the head. Going to finish jack level. How far is it going to run away? That'll be shot. Sitting jack level, the Tony Grantham bowl. And you do come to the point, you're right, Brett, you get the mat, then how can I change it around so I can get some successive ends with myself scoring. And Kelvin Scott, one of the first times he turns his back on that, he knew he was well under the line.
What seemed to just shorten his swing slightly, just at the release point.
He just looked off the mat straight away. It looked. So here's the chance now for Tony Grantham, shoot on a wider line than he played with his first. Needs to get back to this bowl of Kelvin Scott. It's breaking its way in now. Sits to inside here to make a counter and will. That'll be 2. Falls in. That's 2 shots for sure.
Yeah, good bowling, Tony.
Kelvin Scott won't change anything on this consistent backhand draw. And he's certainly got it out on that wider line, Brett.
Close again.
And is it going to hold up long enough to that weight to the jack line? Is it going to sit up long enough or sit outside the bowl? If it falls in, I think still be 1 to Tony Grantham, I would say.
Mark is having a look for us, so Tony's obviously keen to hear what's happening down there.
We got 1.
Yes, that's still the shot bowl. So really, Kelvin Scott then was just 1 roll away from getting that 1 shot draw result. Grantham now trying to add to the head. It's on a good line again. Is the North Harbour or the Auckland player going to get the jack? As he know he's not.
Well, it's a good bowl there, because if Kelvin does draw to the jack and there is any movement, Tony's now got 1 there. Well, 1 on both sides, actually.
It wouldn't have really hurt Brett if he did get the jack around the corner then.
Absolutely.
Because he would have had 2 shots and taken the jack off the centre line. And so it certainly wouldn't have been unfavourable to Tony.
And you've got to say, with the way Kelvin's been playing, those bowls may not be close enough to stop him from drawing the shot here. But let's see.
So here is Kelvin Scott again. Steely-faced Cantabrian, a real good guy. He's out on a wider line. How far is this coming back? Has it got the weight to get all the way down?
He's close.
This is close. This is close if he gets the back of the jack. Wow, he all but.
Yeah, that's the heart and the mouth stuff when he's that close.
So Tony Grantham's going to score and go to at least 15-4, perhaps 15-5. And I suppose the question is now, Brett, where do I put the jack? Where do I put the mat?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Tony dropping short with his last one, probably just happy to get one, as you say, get the jack, and he'll be having a bit of a think about, okay, what length am I going to play? He might go, you know, Tony's a pretty effective long end player.
Well, I was going to say, we at the time we would go ditch to ditch, when, you know, which is on these greens are very hard to play, you know, and the mat is back, all the way back, and I was just questioning whether we're going to go, and we are.
Yep.
It's where we're heading.
Yeah,
for.
I think it's a go-to for Tony. You know, he's a very, very, he and Kelvin are very similar players. They've most of their career they've been front-end players. Tony did win a national pairs title, skipping Mike Nagy, and the same year that he won a national fours playing number 2 with Mike Nagy at lead. And over the years, he's, you know, long ends have been his go-to, and he's swapped over to Kelvin Scott's hand here.
Well, he's done the right thing here as well, because he's also made his first bowl a really effective bowl. So often you'll see a change of length and you don't get that first effective bowl to put the pressure on right from the outset. And yes, he's stolen his hand. And, you know, sometimes that can just make a difference.
And exactly right, and I think, as we've commented, this does seem to be the easier side of this rink to play. But here's a great reply from Kelvin Scott. Is he going to get there?
No, he's not.
No, he's not. Well, there you are. So Tony Grantham's just managed to throw him off his line slightly.
And change his hand. Yeah, I'd like to have seen him playing another one down there, to be fair.
Me too. Brett. Yeah, I'm not sure he needed to change there. He perhaps thought the bowls were a little bit, that bowl of Kelvin Scott's
see, now you're going to play yourself under the line, and that'll move another metre away, and really, well, it's sort of not really an effective bowl. You know, I'd have given one more chance there.
Yeah, I'm surprised he changed. I think he may have thought Kelvin's bowl was a bit closer to the head than it is. And Kelvin will just be working up that line again. He's only one down. He'll be just looking to see if he can come underneath those 2 front bowls. Well,
he knows that his weight he plays is not reckless, so he knows it's just getting that line, isn't it?
And a good example there, under the line, but really good weight. So that gives him 2 seconds. It's
imperative here, though, that Tony does get another bowl. Even if it's not counting, but let's say in the scoring zone, and this is a better line.
Close here.
It's the Grantham bowl. The second bowl, this third bowl's a better weight. It's going to just slip by Jack high, but was certainly in the target area. Just the one down is asking Kelvin Scott. From our view, it looks just...
2 down.
That's interesting. So that back bowl that just came in is, because I was just going to say, for Tony, the opportunity to get a touch on the jack is to increase the count, but he's holding 2.
Kelvin Scott changing his hand. Obviously, conscious he doesn't want to hit those front poles. Let's see how he plays this backhand side.
Well, he's certainly out wider, Brett.
And his bowls don't typically turn as much as Tony's, so I think he is too wide here, and I think Tony Grantham's actually going to get at least 2 and potentially 3 with his last bowl.
So you can see that line is at least a couple of feet different line to the other side of the green, and that's what we noticed earlier on today. And there's a lot of bowls just going out there and struggling to make them become effective bowls. And this line that Tony's on now, this is the line that we're really...
Close here.
This is the scoring line.
Close here.
So that will count if the other one counts now.
So Kelvin Scott, 3 down, leading 15-4, but this change of length, Tony Grantham getting one in slightly in Kelvin's line on that forehand side. Big bowl for Kelvin Scott, even at 15-4. You don't
Absolutely,
want to be dropping
don't
three.
be dropping 3. So he's certainly got a different line than he had. He had a different line with his third bowl.
Close here.
Coming down towards the head now. If it runs on this surface here, not going to quite make it all the way, but was certainly on the scoring line. That'll definitely, Tony Grantham, who knows, definitely 2. Whether that anything else has changed. Tony's
3.
got 3. You heard the mic, Tony Grantham saying he's got 3. And 3 it is. And again we've seen Tony Grantham now taking the mat, sitting right on the 2 metre mark, and dollars to donuts. He'll get the jack down as close to the 2 metre mark under the number 19 as he possibly can. I think he would have liked another metre or so on that jack delivery, really, Brett.
I agree, and just getting Kelvin to change his hand there, where he's been so metronomic on the other side of the rink, just gave Tony a little bit of an opening. Now he's really got to press home the advantage.
Well, it gives Tony the chance to own a hand, early on the head. He'd be disappointed with that because he's a metre lower the jack, and that's certainly the Kelvin Scott. Well, it doesn't matter. It's 9 inches away. It certainly opens the gate for the Cantabrian. Now playing Elmwood Park.
Well, that's an unusual.
It's unusual.
From Kelvin. Maybe just this change of length has just got him in a couple of minds about speed.
Well, we know, Brett, that you can, on these surfaces, you can trap yourself into literally a suicide length, where to try and find that weight and line is so challenging, and that's when the big numbers can come, and they can come quickly. And just outside the centre line is Tony Grantham, just lower the jack.
Better bowl, but you'd think not close enough with the way Kelvin's been
With
playing.
4 bowls, you would imagine. So here is Kelvin Scott. Definitely got a wider line with this one.
Yeah, he's back on that line again, and very close. Very close.
Here it is, as we said, right on top of the jack, sits alongside it, and that's great correction really from that first bowl. It's just, and it's a lesson to people out there. Just dismiss the first bowl, you know where your line is, and concentrate on that for your next bowl. Don't try and force the bowl to get there.
Closer bowl here from Tony Grantham.
He's got the weight to get all the way to sit inside the shot bowl. We're going to be. He does. Falls in.
Oh.
And for shot, just got that touch on it.
Sometimes you just need a little bit of luck, and much better bowl from Tony Grantham, and he lies 1.
So, Scott, out on that, I'd call comfortable side.
Close again.
Close to getting the bowl here. Close to getting the bowl. Has he turned it through far enough? Right.
No, I think Tony Grantham still has the shot, but he'll need another one there quickly. Tony works at Air New Zealand and lives on the North Shore in Auckland, and has played a lot of his bowls in North Harbour, but this year playing in Auckland for the Mount Albert Club.
Well, it could also be, I've heard that rumour there's a exodus moving to Carlton.
Is there? There's not going to be much room in that club.
I don't know how much truth there is in it, Brett. Someone commented to me the other day about it.
Kelvin Scott playing with a bit of weight here, looking for the shot bowl.
Well, it's a 3-shot result, isn't it? We can set
He's
the bowl.
close. I think
He's close.
He's got the jack. Yes, he's got the jack.
There'll still be 1 down unless it goes right outside. It's going to stay alive.
So Great last bowl from Tony Grantham and going to the back and covering, and getting the benefit of having that position bowl.
It looks inside the line from where we're.
Marcus says it's, who's also one of our Bowls New Zealand umpires, says it's in, and it's 15-8.
So fight back at this stage from Tony Grantham, the Auckland-based player, and as Brett rightly said, played a lot of his bowls out of North Harbour. But isn't it great, Brett, to see a good crowd in here, sun's out, perfect green, draw bowlers out there. Really, it's for the purist, this is it, isn't it, really?
Absolutely, and these guys are showing the way to play the game. Singles doesn't have to be complicated. Find good line and length, and away you go. Tony again, probably a little bit shorter with the jack than I would have expected.
Yeah, and you can see here with doing that, Brett, the green line to the jack is a different. You're literally about 6 feet of difference, and perfect weight there from Tony Grantham. But just that line to the jack is slightly different on that. This would more than likely be the shortest head that they have played. So that line to the jack, and you can see straight away Kelvin Scott is inside that line.
Yeah, we talk a lot in the game about first bowl effectiveness, and that's what Tony hasn't done here. Open the way to Kelvin, who's been playing that hand so well. So it's important that Tony really recovers with this one, because you just don't want to give Kelvin too much room in the form that he's in today.
Because, threes and fours can become, they just happen just like that, don't they?
They
and see whether Tony's adjusted that line. No, he hasn't really. He's still got good weight, and Kelvin did really, to be fair, did leave the door open a bit after his first. There was still quite a bit of room, and I'm sure Kelvin Scott, leading 15-8 in the race to 21, will endeavour to capitalise on this.
Kelvin looks like he's gone a little bit wide.
He's out on that wider side as well, and how far is this going to move back? I don't think it'll have enough weight, Brett, to get itself all the way back.
Well, that'd have to be the loosest end we've seen so far from both players.
But I question, Brett, about going to that suicide length. And how often do you see a change of length into that no man's land length, and players struggle to get to, to get that consistency.
And they are the ends that are so dangerous, because
they are very dangerous.
Because suddenly,
and see, we're going to see now, change of hand from Tony, and well under the line. And believe me, for those watching, these players, this isn't how these guys play there. But it's really just come about by, I think it may be an unintentional change of length, I don't know. But it was certainly a length where you're very, very vulnerable if you don't get it right.
Yeah, Tony's shaking his head. I mean, the only way to describe this end is it's pretty ugly for him. And he's going to really need to pull out a good bowl here, because he's about to be 2 down as Kelvin draws the shot. And
leaving a lot of room. Wow.
Nice change by Kelvin Scott.
It certainly was. The good thing for Tony is it does give him a bigger sort of draw target with it sitting alongside the jack and bowl. He can sit to the bowl, and he's sitting out now on a wider line.
How's here?
It's got the weight to work its way all the way back. I don't think it has, Brett. See, and that's it. That hand there, it's just you hurt yourself.
Yeah, and Tony will be very disappointed, because he's scored over on the last 3 ends to claw his way back to 15-8.
Mark that 15th end down.
Yep.
So it's
and to give away a soft 2 and with a bowl to come maybe 3. That'll be heartbreaking for him.
Well, you notice as well, he'd even brought the mat up another mat length as well from the 2 metre mark. So he's playing a completely foreign length, which is not short or it's not long.
Yep. Yeah, you can see the frustration on the body language from Tony.
He's talking to himself there. He's
and it's just so easy when you just play a couple of loose bowls, and with the first 2. Probably didn't look that hard.
No,
it wasn't anything particularly close. And it's just in those moments that you can suddenly find yourself 3 down, and I think that's what we were about to see from Tony any minute now.
And it's not as though that Kelvin sort of splashed all over the top of the jack.
Not at all.
There was room.
I've asked the marker for a measure, so it's obviously a bit of a measure for that third one. So Tony might be fortunate in escaping with just 2 down, and for his fans back at Mount Albert and Birkenhead, we certainly hope that it is only 2.
So Brett, from in the World Bowls perspective, I've been asked, by Stephen McIver, in fact, and Mark Watson in recent times with bowls endeavouring to get itself into the Olympics 2032.
Yes.
And the likelihood of helping the situation.
It is 3.
It is 3. 18-8. It's a
body
killer.
blow.
Of it being like mixed pairs.
Well, look, I think there's a couple of elements. So with the Commonwealth Games being in Brisbane in 2032, and obviously bowls being such a big sport in Australia, largest bowling nation in the world, there is a big focus from World Bowls on seeing if we can get bowls into the Olympics. Our first focus is around Paralympics, because bowls has been there before, and we know that we have a really strong Paralympic story. In the Open Olympics, if I want to use that term, we need to do some work in growing the number of participating nations.
Yes.
And one of our challenges, of course, is when you get to the Olympics, you play as Great Britain. When you play at the Commonwealth Games, you play as well as Scotland and England. So we automatically lose some countries, and we also lose some of the Caribbean and Pacific Island countries who or member nations, as we call them in bowls. But it is a great opportunity for the sport. Bowls Australia and Neil Dalrymple, their CEO, and Daryl Clout, who's our president of World Bowls, who's also from Australia, are really committed to this. It's a huge opportunity for the sport, and it's going to be a real focus for us. And we've just completed a strategic review of World Bowls, looking at this and some other opportunities, and that's going to be something we'll be talking to member nations about it. All things being equal, hopefully at Royal Leamington on Spa, which is the bowls venue at the Commonwealth Games this year near Birmingham, and put together a plan to get our sport into the Olympics. And as you say, definitely a strong chance in Paralympics, and we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't try and get it into the full Olympic program. And I think there's a good chance.
Bowl toucher from Tony Grantham.
That's a nice recovery from Tony after
Certainly
dropping
is.
that 3.
So you would see the likes of mixed pairs as an example, Brett, as a strong, viable part of the playing agenda.
Yeah, look, I mean, the unique thing about our sport is that it is very diverse. It is a mixed sport. Wasn't always that way when you and I first started playing,
No,
Kevin.
It certainly wasn't.
But I think that is unique, and both the Olympic and Commonwealth Games movement are looking to see more diversity, and so I think we have uncharacteristic loose bowl from Kelvin.
Certainly
there.
is.
That's this is.
And you also think that, Brett, that by also changing the World Bowls cycle to the 2-yearly cycle, that certainly one would think is going to strengthen some of, let's say, some of the smaller nations to become competitive.
Yeah, we think so. I mean, commercially, the sport has not done as well as it should have internationally, and we need to develop some really good televised product like this that people can be seeing all the time. The idea of World Championships every 4 years probably worked in the days before digital, but now people want content, and we know we can produce great content. So I think having those events more often, giving those smaller nations more chances to play at the highest level is really important. And my responsibilities as regional director for Oceania is working with a lot of the Pacific Island nations, and we've seen good growth in the game. Cook
Now, this could be a big end. Has Tony Grantham got 3?
He's definitely got 2.
With a bowl to come. Got a chance of making 4, possibly.
And so
18, 12.
Kelvin Scott looks like he's headed off for a toilet break.
That's a Canterbury tactic.
Yeah.
Well known.
But But yeah, I think very uncharacteristic end, and just again shows like the last end. If you miss your line with that first couple of bowls, suddenly it can be difficult to recover on these ends. So Tony's got a great chance here of getting at least 3 and back into the game.
Talking about the content, I think hats off to Bowls New Zealand and Bowls Australia, because I think what we've done collectively with the live streaming now, and with the likes of Sky now becoming involved, Sky Sport Next, etc. We're seeing bowls now on a far more multi-dimensional platform than what we had in years gone by. We all screamed for years to get bowls on TV. Well, there is literally now a plethora of bowls on TV. If you look at the content here, the coverage, the colour, everything else, it's as good as what you'd be seeing if you're sitting in your lounge at home.
Absolutely. I think it's been a game changer for the sport. It's been great to see the Northern...
3 it was.
Well, there you are. So we're at 18-11, and now we've got a game on our hands. Again. So, I mean, Kelvin only needs 3 to get to 21 to win, but...
It's interesting, but I was talking a couple of years ago when I was at Leamington on Spa, and the English women's fours were on, and I spent some time with Sian on it, which was great. It was part of the English women's side. But talking to some of the other people there, in their coverage content in the UK, except for what I'd say the indoor part of it, the outdoor content is certainly nowhere near at that point in time as what we offer to the public in New Zealand and Australia.
I think that's exactly right, Kevin. As you know, I was involved with the World Bowls Tour and the Professional Bowls Association, which plays those big indoor events in the UK, and playing on the portable rink, which probably runs about as fast as this service at Burnside.
Which they're setting up now.
Yeah, that's right. They'll be setting that up for the World Indoors at Potters as we speak, and at Potters Holiday Resort in Norfolk. And on those services, the game's been magnificent, but I think outdoors, because the greens have been a bit slower, maybe not quite the same high standard, but it was good to see the recent English Championships had live streaming for the first time, which gave us all a bit of an insight into how the Greens were playing at Leamington on Spa in anticipation of the Commonwealth Games, because that's where they played the English Championships. So I think it is a big game changer for us. And
another good bowl here from Tony Grantham, getting right to the centre line, one on, one just in behind. The other thing I think as well, Brett, is hats off to Bowls New Zealand, who, if we take our full playing numbers, is one of the sports who's had an increase during these COVID times of participating members or participating players, and the Bowls 3-5 concept has certainly, I think, done a lot to sort of drive just more following of the sport, and the likes of live streaming that we're doing now, and of course corporate business house bowls also help significantly. And I say hats off to Bowls New Zealand and to Mark Cameron and the team, and Neil Dalrymple and the team in Australia, because I really feel that we've moved the game ahead quite significantly in a participating environment.
I think that's entirely right, Kevin. I think when Mark Cameron came on board as the CEO, he was determined to modernise and transform the sport. And he's done that very successfully, with some great commitment from centres and clubs in supporting new formats. And it's great to see Bowls 3-5 now being played.
Good bowl here from Grantham, just going to drop by.
This end's shaping quite interesting, because Kelvin doesn't have a bowl past the jack. And
correct.
He wouldn't want to give Tony an opportunity of playing that shot bowl onto the jack.
Well, you can play the shot bowl on, or get that trail movement down on
the shot bowl.
So asking the marker the position of that shot bowl, and the marker indicating that it's a bowl low. So that means if he's going to play, Kelvin Scott is going to play that hand. He's just going to play with a different line of weight. And
I think back to the video, the digital streaming. I think, for anything the only way to get any sort of proposition in front of people now is via video.
Absolutely.
And Kelvin looks
Going to be under that target he's looking for.
He doesn't like that hand, does he?
No, he was trying to play what I would call a real in between, perhaps a shot, perhaps trying to get to that shot bowl. But playing there, though, the chances are the jack's going to move as well, which certainly is not in his favour. Now, Tony Grantham has got an opportunity here. If he can get past, if he can get a jack trail.
He's close.
He's just trying to get that jet, but he sits on those bowls. That's fine. Now, Kelvin's going to be very careful here what weight he plays, and he's pondering of what shot he's going to actually play, because jack back, all in favour of Tony Grantham. So, and will the bowl hold up long enough with just that pressing weight to get under his own bowl to get to the shot, which if he could get it, is 21.
That's right. I was just thinking, I don't know whether that bowl to the left of the shot bowl, the bowl of Kelvin Scott's his third shot, but if it is, Kelvin Scott could play a shot on his back end, underneath there, sit Tony out for 3, and that's game.
But he doesn't want the jack to move.
No, very tricky.
So
he'll want to make sure he's on the wide side, and definitely not narrow, and onto the back edge of the shot bowl.
So your weight control here is pretty important as well. Having a look as Kelvin Scott looks, I don't know if it's going to come back enough.
No,
sitting on the outside, but he had to be more on the outside, to be fair, Brett, than on the inside, because there was danger on the inside. If you got onto the back of the Tony Grantham bowl, that jack would have squirted out to the side. So he did have to be careful.
Nice to get a message, Kevin, from one of New Zealand's promising young bowlers from your old home province, Darryl Reid, from the mighty Taranaki.
Good man, Darryl.
Recovering from a broken leg from a bike accident, which is why he's not at the Nationals this year. But I've just seen a post from his lovely wife Laurie, and it sounds like he's making a really good recovery. So we'll be looking forward, hopefully, to see him in action at the Summerset National Fours and Mixed Pairs, which we're all excited about. We're in the mighty Taranaki.
I certainly am. I'm looking forward to getting down there with Tamara and the team, and I encourage people now, in the Taranaki area, or Wanganui, or wherever you may be in that close proximity, get your entry into for the national Somerset National Fours and the mixed pairs, because we were astounded, to be fair, last year in Central Otago, the first year of the mixed pairs, and the entry numbers that we got was and let's hope that we can continue that this year in Taranaki, because the entry number was just fantastic.
And I think, like Central Otago, you have that opportunity of playing at country clubs. And the hospitality, I don't think I've ever met so many apricots in my life as we did in Central Otago. The bowls of fruit that were left by the clubs for the players, it was almost embarrassing hospitality. It was so generous.
Certainly we got looked after wherever we went. It was, and I must admit, in the days when we weren't doing the live streaming, to have the opportunity to go out to some of those outlying clubs away from the main headquarters, and they were so welcoming and looked after you, and it was great to really, I had the pleasure of having morning tea with the former All Black hooker, Mr. Hoare, Andrew Hoare, his grandmother, who was 96 years of age, still playing bowls, driving a car, and, at Patiora, and we got looked up. It was fantastic to really, it was. And the Taranaki will be very, very much the same. So we urge you, and you can be sure in Taranaki as well of good greens. I can guarantee that.
I'm told that they're very good, and I know if I said anything, I'd get a message from Grant Hassel on social media. So Grant, we understand that the greens are in fine shape, and you'll obviously be hosting the Great Taranaki Open Fours in the
coming up
next few weeks, which in itself is a great event. Now look, this is interesting.
Yeah,
he has 2 short bowls in a row from Kelvin Scott, and it changed hand.
18-12, and one good score in there from Tony Grantham, and this scoreboard will tighten up very quickly. And you're right, Brett, we've seen that really. We've seen Kelvin Scott playing everything literally within a metre And now all of a sudden, dimensions change. This bowl gets in front of that Scott bowl. Will it? Yes, it will. As it falls out, it's on a straight line to the jack. I'd back that as
Correct. Just one. Come down.
just the one in the market. The other thing I think with Bowls New Zealand, Brett, with the live streaming, when Tamara and I did, I think the very first live streaming was the Nationals in Dunedin. We had a couple of telephones, mobile phones, and some stands, and it was all pretty, very amateurish, so to speak, all right? But we got the coverage to air. That was the main thing, right?
Well, I think, it's great to see a lot of other sports looking at bowls. I think we've got the streaming setup now being used by centres. It's going to be used for the Masters event, which my home centre, Bowls North Harbour, host. And talking to my wife, Robin Walker, who's on the board of Bowls North Harbour, they're really, excited to be able to offer that as a televised event.
Well, what's also happening, here's another good bowl from Tony Grantham, and it'll count for sure. It will fall in right on the centre line. So if you look at the equipment that's here now, it's literally like a TV studio with all the coverage, all the equipment that we've got. And of course, following now from the Nationals, we'll be starting with Tamara and co with the post-production show, which will be live, which will be going out on, I think it's on the new station, the new who I've been doing some work for the last couple of days, all right? So there's a lot of things actually happening because of what we're doing with live streaming. This is...
Kevin, I can't believe this. We're seeing a sea change in this game right here. Tony Grantham forced Kelvin Scott to change his hand. Well, if you didn't force him, Kelvin Scott chose to. That's another 2 to Tony Grantham. We're now 18-14. So, when he was trailing 15-3, he probably felt he had little chance, but that's the way bowls goes. If you just hang in the game and stick to your disciplines.
As you know, Brett, 2 ends can change a whole game. And so Bowls New Zealand will very shortly have a post-production show going out on the airwaves, going live.
Which is just fantastic, and I think I do want to acknowledge the work that Tamara and the Bowls New Zealand team do, and you too, Kevin, with the commentary of the events, because as a bowler now, bowls has increasingly become a 12-month of the year game. We play a lot of events, a lot of the national pathways events, and now
good opening
winter.
Bowl here from Grantham. Toucher sits out to the side. Yeah, well, Tamara and I literally, and of course Brendan Van Nistelrooy, traversed the country with the Champion of Champion events during the winter months at 4 different venues, and there's it's great.
And I know, being part of the Takapuna Club, our members have been able to follow what we call the blue wave around the country, and watching our players, our women who were runner-up in the National Interclub here last year at Burnside, and also runner-up in the Champion of Champion 4s at Pukekohe. And so it's made the game accessible, and the club spirit that it's generating from people being able to watch their club mates in this way is fantastic. And here's another good bowl from
Grantham there. You're right, Brett, we're seeing a real sea change here. Tony Grantham's played 2 bowls, literally jack level, about 15 inches to 17 inches jack level, and putting that draw pressure onto Kelvin Scott now. And to me, is that going to come back far enough? Has it got the weight to get all the way back?
Closer here.
Closer here he is.
Closer here.
Needs a couple of more rolls. Is it going to get all the way? Yes, it will. And sits on that centre line.
One down.
Tamara and the crew, Colin, Alex, they do a wonderful job. And full marks to Mark Cameron and Bowls New Zealand. They've invested in the equipment, and it's this is now on Sky, so it's a live network sport.
Close here from Tony Grantham.
There's one more roll, does it?
Yes.
No,
Only
still
one
to
good
Kelvin
clear
Scott.
calling from the marker.
And of course, now you start to get into the territory where, Kelvin Scott only needs a couple of shots to go out.
Yeah, you get in the old sort
One
of
ball law.
bite your fingernail stages of this. As we saw in the last semi-final, with Kelvin Scott and Mike Galloway, that there's those latter stages of the semi-final.
Yeah, look, I was nervous and I was only watching. It was white knuckle stuff. It was bowls at its best, and this final's really starting to take off. Kelvin just looks a little wide to me.
Goes past the Tony Grantham bowl, but it's coming right back to the centre line.
Probably a sensible bowl, Kevin, because Tony did have that chance of playing for the jack.
He did,
and looking, potentially for the bowl or the jack.
Well, that view there, it gives you a good idea of what it would look like standing at the mat. Sometimes it looks different, from the side view, but that's really what it looks like, and really it dictates what your shot options really are. And although he's one down, he's certainly been very handy at this particular. He's got bowls around that, the old 1 metre mark, and he'll certainly be trying to take advantage here if he can get down to what is the counting bowl and get it. If he gets a touch on the jack around the corner,
He's looking for it.
if he gets a touch on the jack around the corner, well, it's just going to fall under the bowl.
Probably just lacked maybe a half a metre of weight.
Half a metre of weight, because he was on that line to get that touch on the jack to where those two bowls of Tony Grantham's was sitting. That was a great attempt. Have a look at their head now, Brett. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 bowls there who are literally all green to a scoring area, aren't they? They're
exactly right.
They're in an effective scoring area.
And I think one of the characteristics of this end is all of those bowls have been played on that forehand side, which is clearly the better drawing side.
Which confirms that yes, it is a kind of draw, isn't it?
Now, Kelvin Scott, I wouldn't imagine he'd be getting too.
I think he'd be happy if he should, actually, because
any touch of the jack either side, and that's not good news for him.
I think Kelvin Scott would be quite happy to move on to 19, actually, and walk away from that head.
3 ends of not scoring are interrupted by a 1 to Kelvin Scott. He needs 19-14, and this final just gets...
Now it's going to be interesting to see what we do with the length, Brett, now.
So Kelvin brings the mat up?
Yeah, because we have had it changed around a bit. So we'll just see how far deep Kelvin goes. We're coming down towards the 2 metre mark. Ooh. He's not going to lose the jack, is he?
He is going to lose the jack. Now,
right,
that's very uncharacteristic.
Very uncharacteristic. So now we'll see. I'm picking... Tony Grantham may take the mat now all the way back.
So while these guys are looking pretty ice cool from the outside, I'm guessing that, it's getting a little tense out there.
There we go. The mat right back to the 2 metre mark. And I'm picking now. And Grantham will be endeavouring to get that jack. I'm picking to his ideal length from, now he knows where the mat's sitting. He won't mind playing it short because he knows where it's at, but
still not quite as far as I think he would.
No, I still think it's something I'd call that danger, that danger length, Brett, where it's not, it's 6 feet short of being what I call a short end, and more than likely 8 feet the other way to the 2 metre. And we'll see now, Kelvin Scott.
It's getting a little distracted, obviously.
Trying to make that first bowl effectiveness, just walks away, something distracted him.
Yeah, and that's experience, just reset.
Absolutely, reset. And earlier this afternoon, of course, we saw Bev Morrell and Sandra Keith, both of the Canterbury area. They won the Summerset National Pairs, defeating Taylor Bruce and Claire Hendra. Claire Hendra from the Silverstring Club in Wellington, Taylor Bruce from the home club Burnside, running out the winners by 19 shots to 8. And I'll say that I'm not going to mention the age again of Bev Morrell, but for one of our more mature players, what an absolute exhibition of drawing that we saw from Bev Morrell throughout that final.
I think she's like a great bottle of wine. She just gets better and better as the years go on. Bev and Sandra played my wife Robin Walker and Malika Nathan yesterday, and Bev Bev was just fantastic. She, on the number 2 green at Burnside, she was just on fire. And of course, Sandra Keith, her bowls are very familiar with the jack on most surfaces. And I said then, if they play like that, if they continue to play like that, they'll be very, very hard to beat. And so that proved to be the case.
Well, Robin did say to me, I was talking to her, she said, well, Morel just had 3 bowls the whole time around the jack. And
she's got those orange bowls which match the colour of their shirts. So the heat was on, you could say, right from the outset with that pair's.
They were deserved winners. They were outstanding.
Yeah, no,
in their defeating of the so Tara Bruce is part of the New Zealand squad, of course, and Claire Hendra is also in that New Zealand squad. But Bev Morel and Sandra Keith certainly too good. And of course, tomorrow we move to the men's pairs and women's singles get underway. The section play, 2 days of section play. We're at 4 out of 6 to qualify for the post-section play, and we'll be back here, of course, covering those finals in a few days' time. In between time, we'll be back here for the next couple of days covering the live action of the Para New Zealand and the Blind New Zealand Bowls. We'll be covering their events also here at Burnside over the next couple of days.
Now, this is starting to look dangerous for Tony. Kelvin Scott back on the plaster as favourite hand.
Yeah, he has. Now, Tony's got to really play for that jack movement, doesn't he, at 19? Because the danger is you try and draw to it too tentatively and you're going to fall short. So, holding game, and yes, there's weight all right to try and get to the jack or the shot bowl.
Off that bowl.
It's going to get it. They've got a feather. One is the outcome to Kelvin Scott. Still quite a bit of room for Scott to draw. And of course needing 2 to get to 21.
Good bowl from Tony.
Under pressure.
Good percentage line.
Kelvin Scott daring to make 2 of it.
Gone a little bit wide.
He's certainly wider. He's in, I suppose you could say he's in the safe man zone.
Yeah, he won't want to make too much of a target of it. He'd just be looking to try and get second shot, but not too close.
So asking the marker is Tony Grantham, am I 1 or 2 down?
Looks like only 1 from here, but the camera can be deceptive.
Well, it might be pay for you to go and have a look, Tony.
It's not the kind of decision you want to get wrong.
Very close, but I would favour 2 down.
There we go, favour 2 down. So Tony Grantham backs on what the markers said, favouring 2 down. And that's game down. Going for the jack is Grantham. He's close to the jack as he gets the bowl, gets one of the bowls. Not far enough. We're certainly on target to get the jack cleaned back into the ditch. Or dislodge one of the Kelvin Scott bowls, and it's all over. And there it is. Kelvin Scott of the Elmwood Park Club here in Christchurch is the Summerset New Zealand singles champion. And I think it's fair to say, Brett, defeating Tony Grantham, but superb exhibition by Kelvin Scott.
Absolutely. You know, he just had that brief patch in the middle of the game where he changed onto the other side of the rink. But really, he was unerringly accurate, and Tony was really, trying to keep himself in the game. But all credit to Tony Grantham. You know, when the New Zealand selectors are looking for people with fighting qualities, they saw that today.
Well, that game could have very quickly disappeared.
Absolutely. You know, at 15-3, that could have been all over. But in Tony's characteristic fashion, he dug deep and came back into it, but very hard to beat Kelvin when he's in the side.
Well, I think what we saw from Kelvin Scott, and for those who have been around the bowling scene for quite some time, we all know what Kelvin Scott brings insofar as his draw game is concerned, and now he adds another national singles title to his 1998 title to give him 2 national singles titles. And there's not many people out there who can say, "Oh, I've got 2 national singles titles." There might be a gap in between, certainly, but he was outstanding today, and I think the difference also, Brett, came about from that really tight game against Mike Galloway in that semi-final.
Absolutely, it really honed his play, and you could tell he was on the top of his game. And and we say bowls as a game for all ages. 24 years between national singles titles for Kelvin, and earlier today we see Bev Morrell, who's won national championships and participated in national events over many decades. It comes down to just playing good, steady stuff.
So there we've got it from Burnside. We've got the winners of the Summerset National Pairs, that being Bev Morrell and Sandra Keith, who defeated Taylor Bruce and Claire Hendra. And we've got the winner now of the Summerset men's singles, where we saw Kelvin Scott of the Elmwood Park Club in Christchurch defeat Tony Grantham of Mount Albert by 21 shots to 14. My thanks to Brett O'Reilly, who's been with me right throughout this singles final. And we'll be back tomorrow bringing you more coverage from the Summerset National Bowls at Burnside in Christchurch.